I've also studied, and this I think is relevant, future time perspectives, goal setting, resilience, and mindset types of constructs. In general, people, I think we need to splurge. We need to feed our id a little bit from time to time, but usually we need to plan for the future when going through our day-to-day activities, because if we don't accomplish our proximal or short-term goals, then those are the ones that lead to our distal goals. If we don't have success in the short term, we're not going to reach our long-term goals.
The Prepared School Psychologist Podcast is dedicated to enhancing your effectiveness as a school psychologist. On today's episode, I am chatting with Dr. Joel Goodin. Dr. Goodin graduated magna cum laude with a BS in psychology from the University of Arkansas. He then pursued advanced degrees at Florida State University, earning both a master's and an EDS in counseling and human systems, followed by a PhD in educational psychology with a focus on motivation, emotion, stress, and performance. His expertise lies in the intersection of cognition, emotion, stress, and performance. He has dedicated significant research to understanding these factors in both elite performers and learners, as well as in at-risk populations. His commitment to fostering excellence extends beyond his research, as he is known for his contributions to doctoral training programs. He has years of training in a vast array of disciplines, including psychology, social psychology, mental health counseling, research methodology, program evaluation, statistics, instruction, organizational leadership, and educational psychology. That is a long list. He has presented his work both nationally and internationally, publishing in top-tier journals. Welcome to the Prepared School Psych Podcast, Dr. Good.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we like to start off with the most important questions because everyone always wants to know, with all of the streaming services we all have access to, what is your favorite TV show you are watching right now?
Okay, I try not to watch so much because it's easy to binge these days.
Yeah.
But so I also write songs. So I've been writing a lot of songs. And by the time I finish writing 1 or 2 or 3 songs a day, my brain's very tired. So we're talking about cognitive load, and I'm worn out. So I'll watch something easy. And I watch right now something I think it started back in the early 2000s, Chuck, the show Chuck. It's just stupid and silly, and I enjoy it. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. And okay, now you also write songs. After all the other stuff you do, you also write songs 2 or 3 a day. I'm just going to say how impressed I am right now. What genre of music do you like to?
Typically, I don't listen to country music, but I have a connection right now. So I'm writing in that genre, country music for Nashville. So yeah, I've got a song on hold right now. We'll see if it gets recorded. So I do that. The other thing I'd say is just the politics of today, just to take it to a really nasty turn. But, the politics of today, not just cognitive load, but everything that's going on in the world, and the way I would say it does get exacerbated with hyperbole and everything that I don't want to just throw out the word media, but everybody I think is involved in this, social media as well. I think we have something else than a cognitive load, more like an emotional load, where if we're overwhelmed with our emotional load, I think we start thinking very poorly. And we see a lot of that, and I've done a lot of that myself, but, our cognition is affected by emotional overwhelm. I think some of that going on as well. So if I can watch something that doesn't matter at all, completely fiction, that's great for me.
Awesome. Well, in one sentence, how would your colleagues describe you as a scholar and educator?
So for those that know me well, I think say I'm hopefully kind, helpful, professional, and intense. Those that don't know me well, whereas those that don't know me well might say I was quiet, might think of me as eccentric. I'm not exactly sure.
All right, lots of things going on, a lot of adjectives going on there. Well, how long have you been interested in learning about motivation and self-reflection, particularly how this all applies to education?
Okay. Well, I was being educated around age 13, and it had nothing to do with education, but I would go to school with my lunch and I would sell it at lunchtime because supply and demand is very much a motivational situation. So there were people that were motivated to buy my bologna sandwiches at a higher than value. So I was interested in it at that time, not really knowing what I was doing. And I've studied motivation. I think it's the fuel that we live on. As far as self-reflection, I've always sort of been a little pensive, insightful, hopefully, more of a sensitive sort, right? But I've also had high anxiety, bouts of depression throughout stretches of my life. And those will make any sensitive person even more and hopefully intuitive, empathic. Some things grow your emotional sensitivity, whereas other events seem to harden you. I've experienced both, but hopefully I'm in a good place now.
Well, out of all of the areas to research, what about this intersection between cognition and emotion and stress and performance has been so important to you?
For me, that's the model of, it's a model of living. I think living is a performance, not to say that we're doing it just for the other people in our life, but we are performing our roles in life. Um, and when we perform daily, putting an effort implicitly into what we do all the time, but also with them moderated, our efforts are moderated by our thoughts and our feelings. And then we produce a sort of outcome. Of course, another moderating effect on that is stress and whatever life gives us in our context. So I just think of it as a very reductive way to view what we're doing in life. For me, I study expert performance, as you said earlier, and like everyone, I perform daily, and I really do try to perform at optimal levels for myself. It tends to lead to making my life easier, I think. So,
That's wonderful. Well, what are some key takeaways from your research as it applies to the students we all work with?
of course, students vary, but overall, most students don't vary very much, in my opinion. Their learning goals and their measurements vary. And school psychologists have for their learning, they have some memorization, cognitive understanding, some emotional, empathic growth that hopefully they'll have. I would say cramming doesn't work. Everybody should have heard this by now. Cramming doesn't work. And yet, I guarantee you, there are students out there doing it right now. It's Saturday, so they're probably doing it. School psychologists, let's see. I've also studied, and this I think is relevant, future time perspectives, goal setting, resilience and mindset types of constructs. In general, I think we need to splurge. We need to feed our id a little bit from time to time, but usually we need to plan for the future when going through our day-to-day activities, because if we don't accomplish our proximal or short-term goals, then those are the ones that lead to our distal goals. If we don't have success in the short term, we're not going to reach our long-term goals. So we're likely to do poorly when attempting to reach those ultimate or distal goals. The big essays, the tests, the term papers, theses, dissertation. And most students are not forward thinking. They don't emphasize, they've committed to this sort of program of education maybe, or they're forced to in K-12 systems, right? It's mandated. Most students are not forward thinking though, and they don't emphasize the importance of learning as they take each little quiz or do each assignment. A lot of it's like get through that day, and then we'll get serious when there's a test and we'll cram for it. In part, this is due to the context, I think, provided by our system and our instructors. And there's no hate on instructors. A lot of them underpaid, not given enough time, support. But my PhD is in educational psychology. So I studied the whole system, and students will generally get away with anything they can ethically get away with, sometimes more than what they can ethically get away with. So if the teacher or educational system creates assignments and quizzes that allow the student to be passive and just sort of make it through or do the short-term learning, the students won't learn until they're forced to. And often that's never. So big ticket performances like essays, term papers, semester tests, quarter tests often allow students to cram, and they do. Many of them, we see it, they do achieve success. So no wonder they look at me saying, hey, don't cram, it doesn't work. And then they get an A or a B and they're happy and they're like, no, it did work and I'll do it again. So why would they be okay with it? So Dweck would sort of characterize that as a performance mindset, which is what our system's built to produce, unfortunately. Not necessarily on purpose, but we definitely create performance-oriented students rather than mastery-oriented students, where they really want to learn, they do it for the joy of it. DC and Ryan, self-determination theory, would describe that as intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, where if you're extrinsically motivated, you do it because of the pressure, the stresses from the outside, or the rewards that you might get. Whereas those who are intrinsically motivated, hopefully they enjoy learning. They love it. They want to read those books and acquire information. But often what happens is that doesn't mean they're going to be the better test takers. Mm-hmm. So if they don't get an A or B or whatever grade they're hoping for, but they really love learning, I think our system is going to take the joy away from them, at least to some degree over time. And so that intrinsic motivation is likely to turn and be replaced by an extrinsic motivation. I'll just do it because I have to. So we tend to sort of ruin the natural intrinsic motivation, I think, that a lot of students have, taking away their joy, and they just say, well, I wasn't getting the grade I wanted by just enjoying it, learning it. Oh, I'll sink my teeth into this topic because it's interesting. Instead, when they don't get a grade they like, maybe, or a grade that's satisfactory to the system, they're likely to say, well, I need that grade. How do I get it? Mm-hmm. And it might shift into extrinsic motivation or performance mindset. So I spoke a lot. I'll let you ask your question.
Well, it started making me think about way long time ago when I was in grad school. I've also taught in graduate programs. You obviously are teaching in a lot of doctoral programs. It's interesting because I think, you had mentioned kind of what the K-12 system pushes a lot of time, but I think that sometimes extends to our graduate school programs as well. I've had instances where students have kind of realized they're not going to be able to get that A. And then all of a sudden it's is there extra credit? I need to get this A. And we're definitely pulling away from that big picture, as you were talking about, like the love of learning and what do we need to learn to, be great in this field and those types of things. What types of things would you suggest if you could kind of rework graduate programs so that we could get back to that love of just, we all decided to spend years of our lives on a topic because this is something we are so passionate about. But I feel like sometimes in graduate school, we get pulled away from that passion.
I think it would require a big systemic shift. I think we do that sometimes in dissertations. And if you're, depending on the mentor and the committee, by mentor, I mean chair. But so sometimes we do allow, that's when the student, and they're very surprised by it and they don't typically enjoy it at first, but they do get to study something that more or less they get to choose, and they get to really go in deep into that topic. How to do that along the way? There are a lot of options, I think. So I work with mainly doctoral students, so I'll speak to that. If you can make everything, and this goes back to, I hadn't thought about this, John Keller, he was at Florida State while I was there. Dr. Keller and his ARCS model, attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So, his idea was basically you have to obviously do these things for teaching, but one of the most important ones was establish the relevance along the way. And I think what I experienced was, and this is not unique to my university where I teach, and I've taught at a few others, but I think what we do is we teach these courses and then suddenly they're in the dissertation sequence and it's completely different. So if we could build in that thing they're interested in earlier on, of course, they have to do some exploring of topics and things like that. But if we can let them go into what they're truly interested in earlier on and create assignments around that really are obviously overtly relevant to the dissertation they may write. The more we can do that, basically creating the connections in there, obviously in front of them with their own mind, they realize what I'm doing right now will be part of what I need for later. And not just skill building, but more like content and tying it together for them when they don't understand, why am I doing this stupid assignment? If we can tell them, here's why, then that's likely to encourage and support that intrinsic or motivation or mastery mindset. So I think the more we can do that, that'd be good. Just that's one little tiny way, maybe.
Well, it makes me think about all of the middle school and high school students I've ever tutored in math who have always asked me, when am I ever going to use this? When do you use this, in your day-to-day life? And one of my responses always was, well, I use this every day that I come and tutor you. Like it's been a wonderful thing for me to be able to know this math. But trying to find those actual applications to day-to-day world for our students in the K-12 system, for our doctoral students in their, key learning areas as well. I think those are some great suggestions there. Now, I know you mentioned that your research, helps support you in your day-to-day life. We know school psychologists have extensive knowledge in cognition and emotion. They are also often under immense stress and expected to perform in high-stakes roles within their schools. What might you say to a school psychologist, keeping in mind your research in all these areas, to assist them in their day-to-day work?
So first of all, I would suggest they stay mindful, keep attention on their physical and mental health. If you don't have those, what good is the rest? So we're sort of lucky that we are placing more emphasis on social emotional health, things like that throughout education. But often, even or especially in fields like psychology or school psych, I'll speak for what I know. There's little actual support or strategy sometimes. We talk about it, but there's not necessarily a lot of teaching students how to create that work-life balance and learn for themselves the coping and stress management abilities that they may need to teach their students or the students they work with. They need those for themselves. So that's sort of the emotional component of things. In terms of cognitive learning, I've created a method of learning. I've just put together a lot of different theoretical concepts and strategies. It begins with mindfulness meditation. So starting your day, if you're going to learn tomorrow and you're going to spend the day learning, and then start with some mindfulness and maybe do it halfway through the day as well. A type of like segmentation, which is sort of like a 25-minute working session and then 5 minutes of a reflection to see if you're headed in the right direction. But that Pomodoro rest should be more than just about is my learning headed in the direction that I want, but are my stress levels good? How is my body feeling? So emotional check-ins as well. Am I exhausted? If you're exhausted, you probably need a break or some sleep. Learners should reflect on their stress levels, emotional variables, physical energy, somatic indicators. So they need to look for those emotional yellow or red flags. And students, ultimately, I believe they have a faster process of learning and performance if they take time to do that meditation, that mindfulness. I think they end up saving time in the long run, even though it seems like it's no value added. They're just wasting 15 minutes of their time, perhaps. It should actually shorten their process because it should help their brain work better throughout the extent of their learning. So this premise sort of mirrors the longer term process of avoiding burnout that we do in general in life. If you don't take time to look at your whole life and where your body's at yearly or monthly, then it's sort of that same issue of burnout, but in a sort of daily capsule.
Well, based on your research, what do you think are some next steps in the field of education? Like, how do you see your research being applied more?
I think AI, artificial intelligence, will be huge within the next 2 years, probably the next 5 years would be my guess. Prompt engineering, just knowing what words to type into AI will be extremely important. That skill set, I don't know, it may die out after a while because, I don't know, depends on what AI does and how quickly it learns. But so I think those things will continue. I think we're also seeing shifts to online education. We're seeing shifts in certificate-based educational opportunities. I'm even seeing, I don't know if you've seen it, some online university is promoting a competency-based master's program. And I'm sure it's not the only one. But educational systems have to change at all levels to provide a healthier and more effective learning opportunity. Businesses are looking, corporations are looking for innovation and creativity, but we're not really setting students up to foster those, to develop those skills and to have that freedom. And I think that universities, even K-12 to some degree, they can partner with corporations, companies, businesses, find out what are the needs that you have. What do you want our students to look like when they finish? They can create pipelines, agreements. Of course, the student will still need to sort of reach thresholds of learning to be able to get that job. It won't be promised necessarily, but we'll have relationships. I think we can do that. And I don't think that will ruin education or scholarship. I think it will help. I think there's a lot of people right now that are sort of feel disconnected from education and feel like it's not really getting me what I want. I have this much student debt and I don't have a job doing what I want. And so I think if we can create those connections again, promoting that relevance and showing them, no, our students we have a relationship as a university with this organization in engineering or whatever it might be, then I think we can really show them, look, we're not necessarily teaching to the test anymore. We're teaching you the skills that will help you do well in a job at X corporation.
That's incredible.
I don't know. I'm hopeful.
Lots of opportunities, lots of options that exist out there. Like you had mentioned, with AI, we're not quite sure where certain things are going. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for some of these collaborations. For our listeners who want to learn more about what you do, what are some actionable steps that they can take?
I would say put in the effort. That's really obvious, but a lot of students just sort of like take what comes at them. If you put in the effort. If you don't put in the effort, you definitely won't achieve your goal. And I'd say focus, and I'm pulling a lot from, I haven't mentioned it yet today, but deliberate practice theory, which is from Anders Ericsson, talked about effort, focus, feedback from a mentor, but also self-feedback, checking in like I described with the Pomodoro technique. So focus means putting your phone away. For me, I think that's really important, not just in education, but in life. When we talk, when you talk to anybody, any engaged conversation, phones tether us to this constant and this sort of faux sense of connectedness that generally it does. Talked about cognitive load and emotional load earlier. I think it wears those down, especially, some of the social media platforms.
Yeah.
During the wrong political season, you're just going to be exhausted every day if you keep reading. So it's sort of like lowering your carbon footprint. I encourage everybody to not just put their phone away, but to generally decrease the amount of activity they have with anything that's not really encouraging them and giving them joy in terms of social media, which comes through the phone generally. So I've cut mine down by like 50%. That's really helped me with energy, peace, just contentment, and ability to have creative thought as well. So I think doing those things, self-reflect throughout the day, self-reflect weekly, monthly, and not just on January 1st because it's the new year. Do that all the time. Am I headed in the direction that I want to go? And get a mentor, not necessarily a dissertation chair, but find somebody, maybe it's you for them, find somebody that can sort of coach them and say, are you headed in the direction? Let me give you some tips, or let me listen to what you want and reflect back to you. Here's what I suggest. Follow a schedule that optimizes your outcomes. Don't overwork. One of my favorite psychologists spoke of humans as sort of managers or bosses of their bodies, right? Of ourselves. Be a good manager for yourself. Do that for yourself. You can ask for greatness still. You can still ask for greatness and something close to perfection, but within reason. Be kind and thoughtful, and don't be cruel and harsh to yourself. Encourage and motivate yourself, but also give yourself grace and mercy and time to rest. Reward yourself. And as a motivational expert, I would say, I know for a fact that we all like to be rewarded. Take the time to reflect on and celebrate what you accomplish, even the small things. So those are sort of the 4 things that I would suggest. Put in effort, stay focused, self-reflect, and follow a schedule.
I love those tips. Those are excellent. I love that you brought up the celebration piece too. I think in our fast-paced world, and so many of us who work in the public education system, there isn't always time to acknowledge what you have accomplished because there's already a long list of things that we need to do next. And so that opportunity that can be tied into that self-reflection about what's worked out really well, what are some things that I'm really proud of myself for that I can just acknowledge before we decide, okay, now what's next on my list? I love that you brought that up. Thank you. Well, this podcast is called The Prepared School Psychologist. When you think of the term prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in your role?
You're talking about me for my role?
Yeah, your roles that you're in.
Well, just generally speaking, we have to understand the skills needed and the outcomes expected in each role. I've got a lot of different roles, and then things I sort of, I think I'll write some music for this period of my life, or I'll do whatever. And with each one, we acquire skills, hopefully implement them, but we have to be mindful of our approach. Is it overtaxing me? Is it worthwhile? Do I enjoy it? Even if it's not worthwhile on paper, if I enjoy it a lot, maybe I keep doing it. So focus on what you need to learn. One thing that I tell a lot of people, used to do a little bit of life coaching. And one of my favorite things just to say to anyone is gain your expertise and your skill set, but also to the degree that you can, start to offload anything that doesn't require your expertise. Cool. So that should be where your true efforts lie, the things that other people can't do, that you can't say. I mean, unless you love mowing the lawn, for instance, maybe pay somebody, like I used to mow lawns at age like 10, 12, 15, I'd pay that guy, pay the kid in the neighborhood to mow your lawn for you. You can spend that hour of your life doing something that makes you 5 times that amount of money in that same amount of time. Do that, when you can, with the types of things that you don't like doing and that aren't going to be financially beneficial for you. Mm-hmm. Spend the time doing what you're best at. Delegate when you can. Focus your energy and efforts on the areas of expertise that require your active response. And then going back to AI, automate the other things, not just delegate, but automate things when you can. And I'm sure you do that with the podcast to some degree. You delegate as well a little bit, but automate what you can and shorten your process. Offload side tasks when possible, and you'll be better prepared to grow and ultimately implement your expertise and be seen for what you're best at.
I love those. Actually, just the other day, because I have a team of people that help support the podcast and all the other wonderful things that I do. That was one of the questions that we checked in on was, what can we do more efficiently? What can we do that's going to help us be more effective so that we can be, utilizing our expertise all the time? And so are there better systems? And that was something that someone brought up on the team, that we needed to tweak some of the systems that we had, that they weren't as automated as they could be. And sometimes having those conversations with other people can be really helpful because they know that one thing that you didn't know, or someone else saw something or just knows of something. And it's just so wonderful when we have those collaboration opportunities to be able to share some of those ideas that we have. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful information and being here today. I just want to thank you so much for your time today and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, this concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych Podcast. Maintaining a state of preparedness and a commitment to ongoing professional development are key to excellence in our field. Stay tuned for future episodes and remember to subscribe for valuable insights delivered directly to you. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day. That concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych Podcast. And I hope today's discussion equipped you not just with knowledge, but also the confidence to take action. Remember, every conversation we have and every resource we share builds a bridge towards a more inclusive and empowering learning landscape for our students. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and resources to support your journey. Share this podcast with colleagues. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, everyone, the information and advice provided in this podcast are for guidance purposes only, and all listeners are required to follow both federal and state law and their own school district guidelines and policies. Thank you.